This video is dedicated to providing answers as to who is responsible for what happened to the advanced ancient civilization, what happened directly as a result of the destruction of this civilization, and why this information is very relevant in the present day. Ever since I came into awareness of it, I have felt an urgency to get this information back out into the collective awareness. My name is Michelle Gibson. When I first uncovered the physical layout of the planetary and consciousness grid, my first reaction was concern about what would happen if the dark forces ever got a hold of this information. I subsequently realized the dark forces already have this information and have been negatively manipulating the grid, and thereby our consciousness, by inflicting maximum pain and suffering at locations on it. I saw where modern history reads like a book, and that not only did the grid need to be healed, I understood that this information about its existence needed to get back out into the light of day and back into collective awareness for the healing of humanity as well. Race and religion have been used to manipulate and engineer us. My awareness continued to expand to include the details about the Moors, Washita Moors, and Hebrew Israelites, their global presence, and my belief formed that humanity was in unity consciousness up until 1492, if there is any accuracy whatsoever to our historical timeline. I will have a separate video about the unity consciousness piece because I have very specific reasons for believing that because of what has come up in my research. The world history we have been given is filled with war and violence, death and destruction. Yet I have very good reason to believe that humanity was actually on a positive evolutionary path until this timeline was hijacked by forces with a very negative agenda. I really think the Catholic Church did not exist before 500 or so years ago. Why do I believe that? Because the advanced ancient civilization built everything on the planet, including the Vatican. When the timeline called Rome was superimposed on the existing timeline and the history of the world rewritten, the buildings of the ancient civilization were reattributed to the Romans and Greeks, and so on and so forth, and not to their actual builders. The false timeline was grafted onto the infrastructure built by the ancient civilization. The star map work of the Vatican and Rome shown here is from Wayne Herschel's research. The Moors were the master astronomers and builders, not the Romans. This is a comparison of the Roman Colosseum and a better preserved Colosseum in Pula, Croatia. We are told that the Romans built the Colosseum in Croatian. There is a major line that emanates from the North American star tetrahedron that goes through Croatia on its way across Romania, the Crimea, Georgia, Chechnya, Ukraine, and so forth. This is a fascinating global alignment, and I will be discussing it in a future video. It includes the ancient Silk Road. In this slide you see the so-called Roman Aqueduct of Segovia in Spain and the Chalpa Aqueduct in Tepoztlan, Mexico. Funny, I didn't know anything about the Roman Empire being in Mexico. Did you? This is the Nashville Parthenon. They want us to believe that it took only 2 years to build for the 1897 Tennessee Centennial Expo. Seriously? I would like to point out that it is sitting on top of an earthwork, which is significant for the mound-building ancient civilization. One more thing before I move on to the main point of this video. I found this picture of the capital of Malikiak, Palau, in the South Pacific when I was following a long-distance alignment starting from San Francisco, California, that went through Malikiak. This entire complex is huge. Is this overkill for an island nation with a small population? In 2018 it was 22,000? Or does it represent something else entirely? I also want to point this out as a beautiful example of domed architecture. I definitely have an opinion as to who really built the world's domed buildings. I have recently come to realize that the suppressed story of the civilization of the Moors the Washita, and the Hebrew Israelites is a template for the globalist elite for their plans to control humanity and destroy Western civilization in the present day. I'm also going to say that while unfortunately the globalists are far along in the implementation of their plans because they have been working on it for a very long time, I believe that conditions are in place for a new positive timeline for humanity. The globalist plans have been interrupted. I would not know relevant current events except for Twitter. I was never on Twitter until February of this year, and I got a Twitter account to become a Twitter activist and help red pill people by tweeting truth bombs. I am following truther and awake people, and I see current events that are happening in real time on my Twitter feed that I would not otherwise be aware of because it is not something that would be covered by mainstream news, which I don't follow anyway. So before I go off on too many more tangents, let me get back to who I believe is responsible for what happened to the ancient advanced civilization. I have followed the work of Peter Moon and Rick Smith. The work of both men contain important clues and information about the Moors. I am cautious in my approach to accepting information as valid, but if it resonates with me over time and ultimately makes sense as an explanation, I am more comfortable with it. I bring this up because I tend to accept what they are saying as good information. First, Peter Moon. I have read a number of his books. I think it was either in Montauk Book of the Dead or Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal. I don't remember which to say with certainty. He writes about the scrying activities of John Dee and Edward Kelly bringing in fallen angels and other lower vibrational entities. The Russians actually corroborated this exact information in a press release in February of 2015, in which they issued a grave warning about fallen angels. Rick Smith, also known as the UFO teacher, has an interesting personal story in that there has been multi-generational ET contact with the women in his family, except this generation, where he is the contactee through which information is received. In his book, Moor, Mason, Alien, he brings out what happened to the Moors was the result of an ancient vendetta against the family of man and the Temple of Solomon by what he called the Shatu regime. In his video, European Confessions of a Moorish Legacy, he goes into depth about where that ancient vendetta against the Moors and the family of man came from, as well as providing information about the Moors. He also brings in the reptilian, Anunnaki, and Archon, who he calls the Greys, involvement in what has taken place. I have come to see the fallen angels, reptilians, and Archons as being primarily responsible for what happened to the advanced ancient civilization and what has been going on up to the present day. Not as sure about the Anunnaki's direct involvement in what has been taking place on this planet, but I don't discount the possibility. I think what happened directly as a result of the destruction of this ancient civilization was a human and social engineering process in which race and religion were weaponized, and that somehow racial phenotypes were engineered and categorized by continents. Europe equals white, Africa equals black, and so on. Christopher Columbus, the Jesuits, the Spanish conquistadors, and the British East India Company were the agents by which the takedown of the ancient global civilization ensued under the guise of exploration and discovery to find gold, religious converts and land, religious administration and education, and trade ventures. Actual results were the exploitation and destruction of indigenous populations, theft of land, considerable wealth and resources, forced religious conversion, destruction of culture, and genocide, and more of the same through the so-called trading company. Christianity was weaponized as missionary zeal with no compunction about abuse and torture to convert, or murder if refusal to convert. Race was weaponized and used to create division, separation, and fear. It was never about the upliftment of white people over others. It was about taking out the higher consciousness of the planet and lowering the collective consciousness to the lowest common denominator, or as I also say, to the level of Beavis and Butthead, for the purposes of control and domination, and I believe this is the result of an interdimensional war against the Creator and creation through humanity. The identity of the true Israelites, the 12 tribes of the Great Central Sun, the children of Israel, Mother, Father, God, was replaced with a false identity and hidden away, and many were relegated to an existence of slavery, degradation, and marginalization if they weren't killed. This subjugation allowed for the identity of the true Israelites to be co-opted by the Khazarian Jew Zionist crowd. The Rothschilds purchased Jerusalem in 1829 and subsequently acquired considerable land in Palestine in the 1800s and early 1900s. Many of you may know this already, that there are four city-states which serve as the foundations for the creation of a new world order. The Vatican equals spiritual control, City of London financial control, Washington, D.C. military control, United Nations world government. They have done innumerable things to prevent the awakening of humanity, which is their biggest fear. Once we wake up, claim our power, and know about their severe crimes against humanity, they are toast. They covertly use methods like chemtrails, fluoridated water, tainted food supply, EMFs, TV, movies, a controlled media, to name a few, in an effort to control the population. They tell us in the Georgia Guidestones about their plans for depopulating the planet, and like everything else they do, they use positive-sounding verbiage to disguise a negative agenda towards humanity. Just as Christianity was weaponized against the ancient civilization, radical Islam and Sharia law is what they have in place to take down Western civilization. Like the destruction of the ancient civilization, this is another human and social engineering process that has nothing to do with benefiting humanity. Problem, reaction, solution. The destabilization of Western civilization by radical Islam is going to be restored to order by the New World Order, or so they planned for centuries. In the United States, some places have more issues with this than others. There has been massive corruption in our government surrounding complicity with the globalist agenda. Their activities are being more and more exposed in the alternative media and the internet. They do death and deception well and will say and do anything that serves their purposes. But it is getting harder and harder for them to keep their activities hidden because their high crimes within government and crimes against humanity are being exposed. In Europe, the social problems occurring with Islamization are much worse than here, though it is happening here in different parts of the country. In Europe, the influx of refugees from countries which have been intentionally destabilized to create the problem, the cabal deep state really exists for those who may not believe it, is causing major issues for the citizens of these countries. Throughout Europe, women are afraid to go out for fear of being raped because of ongoing attacks, including coordinated ones. If you have not yet heard, in England, an outspoken journalist named Tommy Robinson was doing a live stream interview outside of a courthouse where there was a trial going on involving Muslim members of what they are calling a grooming gang. The police arrested Tommy for doing the live stream, and within a short period of time on the same day was tried, sentenced to a 13-month jail sentence, immediately taken to jail, and a gag order was placed on the press. He was released on bail recently after winning an appeal, but this speaks of a very concerning situation with regards to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and how the term hate speech is being applied to favor the Islamization agenda, which includes the facilitation of child rape. I came across the Clock of Destiny website several years ago, and the impression that it made on me is that Islam, in its pure and original form, is about applied sacred geometry and universal laws. Marco Rodin, inventor of the Rodin coil, intuited a key in the Baha'i scriptures that deciphered vortex-based mathematics, and I believe this is all part of the advanced applied knowledge of the ancient civilization. In conclusion, I presented answers to which I have given much thought to explain how what happened to the ancient civilization is relevant in the present day. No, I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am awake. My work is about bringing out what has been hidden, and my intention is to bring this information to light for awareness, healing, and transmutation for the highest good and greatest need. I have had to process through getting angry and upset at what was done, but I know that the only way out is to go into higher consciousness of the heart and to align with what we want and not with what we don't want. Those who are awake and aware must endeavor to hold the neutral space for the integration of darkness and light as we move through these pivotal times. It is so important to unite in love as one humanity and no longer allow the strategy of divide and conquer to work.